exquisite little raised center hall cottage on the right over here, the little white one. Still got the hurricane shutters after all these years.
Yes.
Now the Esplanade bus that runs the Canoe Portage Road, this road, I love this bus. It goes to the park where we're going now, it goes to the cemeteries where we're going later. But I love the Esplanade bus most because it brings you right here on the right to Cafe de Gare. Cafe de Gare, al fresco whenever possible, but they got the windows in and the air conditioning on today. I love that place. I get the French onion soup, 2 Virgin Marys. And reaching over the street here, these live oak trees. We don't build much out of that, but we love them. This Byzantine-style Catholic church right here, Our Lady of the Rosary. Just past Holy Rosary. Cabrini Orphanage, built by Mother Cabrini, 1895. Of course, she would become Saint Cabrini. And her cell is still maintained above the door in that girls' school. And St. Louis Cemetery number 3, sometimes I go here. But I much prefer Metry Cemetery where we're going.
Wow.
And the old folks in this assisted living prefer the view out their front window.
Yeah,
It's huge.
that's
It's 3.5 square miles, 1,300 acres. 8 feet of flood right here for Hurricane Katrina. Thousands of trees were destroyed, but tens of thousands of trees survived, and we're going to see a bunch of that. In the museum, of course, the one the City Park Museum streetcar refers to, this museum is the 1911 gift of Isaac Delgado, a Jamaican sugarcane merchant. Isaac Delgado is buried where we're going. And 3 of Edgar Degas' works hang in here, including one painted in that American townhouse back there. $10 adult admission here, worthy of that. And these lagoons were dug during the Great Depression by the WPA, Works Progress Administration. Anyone that needed food in the Depression could come here. They dug these with shovels and wheelbarrows for food. There's 11 of these lagoons. The skilled labor built these bridges for food. And you can see WPA cast into this bridge up here. And then this park was an unofficial campground for 3 years after Hurricane Katrina. There had been 8 feet of flood in here, mud everywhere, trees blown over, cars floated in here, absolute disaster. We thought it was ruined forever. We did not touch this park for years. And people camped in here in the mud for 3 years. And this artwork on the right here, the work of my favorite artist in the world. This is the work of Enrique Alferez. Some of us saw some of his later works. Enrique Alferez was born 1901 in Mexico. He settled here 1930 and did 70 prolific years of sculpture here till his death in 1999. Enrique preferred bronze. But during the Depression, he resorted to concrete. This one of his Depression-era works, The Lost Goddess of City Park. There's works all over the city once you get a feel for it. More of Enrique's work in this garden, concrete and bronze, but come back out here for that. Because we're going on the left here. I don't know that I mentioned the name of that sculpture. That's The Lost Goddess of City Park. But come back out here. We're going on the left right here to the Best Off Sculpture Garden. This garden is free. It's a gift of the Best Off family to New Orleans. And yes, the Best Offs are buried where we're going. And Morning Call Coffee House, right over here, formerly in the French Market. Cafe au lait, beignets, my favorites are right here. Alligator sausage sandwiches, gumbo, étouffée, red beans and rice. Restrooms inside this cafe all the way to the back. And there are restrooms in the sculpture garden as well. Now, y'all, we need to leave here. Now imagine in that, the water 4 feet higher than this, driven by 140 mile an hour wind. It's not too surprising that the back of this the earth eroded away from the wall fell in 3 places. No, but we're going to go see one of the 3 breaks. Our own fussy police department. And you know, that is Lake Pontchartrain, the preferred route to France by sailing ship. Now, this used to be the Gulf of Mexico 5 million years ago. The river built the South Shore with all of that mud that comes out of those now wheat fields and cornfields. All of that drains through, all the middle of the country drains through here. The river used that mud to build the South Shore to this lake. There was a 1-mile opening out there to the right. We call it the Wrigley's. That 1-mile opening goes to the Gulf of Mexico. But the real continental edge of North America is 24 miles over there. Lake Pontchartrain, of course, 24 miles across, 60 miles wide. We do have a bridge across the middle, and perhaps you can see that bridge right there. And the big bump out there to our right, the big hump out there, that's the 8-mile hump. That is 1/3 of the way across Lake Pontchartrain.
Oh, I see. Way out there, Jesus.
Now, the way we built this land out here, we built this concrete wall out in the lake. And then we took dredges, giant vacuum cleaners, sucked up the seafloor, threw it across the wall, and filled up the back here. Made new land. Those steps, very convenient. The last couple of steps are very slippery, but they're convenient enough to get into the lake, but they're to break wave action. We call it brackish. You can usually taste a little salt, and if it blows east for like a week, which it's about to do, this will turn green, and you can smell the salt standing next to it. They'll be mostly freshish fish, but when closer to the end, they become ocean fish. And when that east wind blows, those fish follow that green water in. We'll get sharks right here. We'll get pilot whales, which is the biggest dolphin, really, the pilot whale. Biggest porpoise. Now, this pump house on the left, that's how we get the water out of New Orleans. Every drop of rain that falls in New Orleans has to be thrown into Lake Pontchartrain. We got 50 of these pump houses. We had 25 before Katrina. Yeah, there are hundreds of boats back here. These are new to New Orleans. Our boats were thrown across this levee to our left. Now, we had boats laying around right here, but the boats laying here were from across the lake, 24 miles away. At the time of Katrina, I was the faculty advisor to the University of New Orleans sailing team, and all of our boats were thrown across the levee. So, the National Guard would let me back here, ostensibly to look for those boats. I found them right away, but I kept coming back here day after day, sightseeing, alone. It was awesome. Now, all of our boats were thrown across this levee, right up, mainly in this corner here. I'm going to show you. But there were plenty of boats laying here again from across the lake. And that oak park back there, all those oak trees, there were boats standing on their keel, the fin, holding onto an oak tree with one wire, standing there on the ground. The water came in fast, but it went out slow. And those boats drifted up against the trees. Now, many were laying on the side, but several were standing up on the keel, holding onto an oak tree with one wire. It was amazing. And this gate was shut. All of our boats were thrown mainly right here. I climbed this pile of boats day after day alone. And with time, I became confident that pile of boats would stayed right across this canal, right there. And after a little while, he couldn't leave, obviously. He knew he was dead. The water was coming over his side, too, storming over that side. He just waiting for the levee to break, his house to be blown away, and him to die. Suddenly, the water stopped going over the other side because it had broken on this side. Rudy lived. All of this right in here new. And the condition of the street is water pressure. Pushed the street down. But the end of the break, this break was right here. So these houses, not the big white ones, but these smaller ones survived. Now they were totally blown out. Every window, every door blown in. The water had been 8 feet above the peak of these roofs. And then the water went down to the gutter, which is sea level, and stayed for 1 month. Now the water behind that wall back there is still at gutter height on this house. That's sea level.
Yeah.
I left last for Katrina. I might have been the last person out of New Orleans. Normally, my wife at the time, Teresa, and I would be the very first people to leave for any hurricane. We looked forward to that. We would have our plans made. We called that an evacuation. But Katrina was different. We knew it. Not everybody accepted it. We did. Teresa left immediately, taking her 9-pound poodle and her 3-pound poodle west of here to a rice, sugarcane, crawfish farm. I stayed here to make the house hurricane resistant, and so far as that's possible. And then that traffic jam began to build. Every lane of every interstate highway had been converted to outbound flow. Every lane, every interstate, outbound, gridlock, bumper to bumper. I wasn't getting in that mess. I knew Teresa was safe. I knew the dogs were safe. So I did what I could for the house. And then I drank coffee for 2 days, watching that storm approach and the traffic jam. Eventually the traffic jam went away, and a man came on the news at that point and said, if you're still here, put an axe in your attic. You can chop your way out, you might not die. I thought that was dramatic, but I figured I'll get the axe. I went to the shed, got the axe, and walking back to the house, the silence overwhelmed me. My neighborhood, less traditional, every single person was gone. Every single person had the wherewithal to go somewhere they wanted to go anyway. Not a soul remained. Not a moving vehicle, not a running air conditioner, silence. And it dawned on me that the birds had left. I never saw that before. I figured it was time to go. And on this house to the left here, the beige one, brown brick, can you see above the door that white X painted on that wall? Mm-hmm. Every house in New Orleans, every building other than the French Quarter had the rescuer's X on it. The bottom of the X would be the sea level, where the water stayed for a month. The 0 in the bottom of the X states that 0 human bodies were found in that house. 6 is the highest number I've seen. Now, I did drive out of here late. I could go, there was no traffic, I could drive as fast as I can do. It got windy. I made it to the party at the farm late, but I made it, and we woke up the next morning to the news that the levees had failed. The city was filling with water, and we knew that our lives were changed, and we weren't going sailing Wednesday night. We worked on that farm a couple of weeks, helping our hosts a little bit and exhausting ourselves so we could sleep, but we did watch television, as did the world, watch Hurricane Katrina's aftermath on television. And Teresa was seeing pets, animals that had been left behind, struggling in the streets of New Orleans. She decided she was coming back, and I came with her. When we got here, the city was surrounded by the National Guard. They said, you can't go in there. There's no police. They ran away. There's no hospitals. They're all destroyed. No water to drink. What they left unsaid was, we don't want you looting in there. And the few remaining police are in an agitated state. Teresa didn't want to hear nothing about no, and she talked her way in here for animal rescue purposes. I came with her. The animal rescue people would find out where a truckload of pet food was coming. Usually it would be a flooded, looted gas station somewhere near the edge of the city, so we'd go to these places, and there might be 10 or 15 animal rescue vehicles. They're all private cars, all the trunks open. Everyone sticking plugs in tires that had been punctured by storm debris in the street. So we'd plug the tires, pump them up, look at maps, figure out where the city had been pumped out. Eventually the truck with the pet food would come. We'd get all we could carry and go into an assigned neighborhood. And Teresa and I were assigned this neighborhood when it was pumped out, this street. So we'd idle in here, not one soul, not one person. The authorities had driven bulldozers down each street once to push the houses out the street here, to push the cars and poles out the street. But other than that, this was as the storm left it. So Teresa and I would idle in here, not one soul, silence. The only sound would be our own tires crunching into debris in the street. This gray chemical gasoline mud covered the whole ground, went up the walls of the houses to sea level. Here was the gutter hydrant. Every door, every window blown in. Here it was water pressure, but elsewhere in the city it was looters and rescuers. Every door was smashed everywhere in the city except the first door. So Teresa would pick somewhere to put the pet food. She liked these garages over here on the right. So she'd pick one of these and it remained the same one. She'd walk up under there, reach to the smashed door and put a broiler pan of pet food down where the animals could find it, but the rain wouldn't get on it. I'd stand in the middle of the street in the mud with 2 guns, looking for a threat. I never saw a threat. No homeowner, no looter, they were gone, and no police. Eventually, I'd learned how lucky I was not to cross paths with the few police that were still here. They were in a bad mood. I don't blame them, but the fact is that some of those police were shooting first. You might Google Danziger Bridge. The pets did good and bad. As you might imagine, almost no cats drowned. And the previously invisible rodent population had been driven to the surface by the flood. The cats had a field day. The cat attitude was, where has this been all my life? And they had this cat utopia for about 2 months. And at that point, there was a major kitten bloom and a flea infestation that complicated the cats' lives. At that point, we began to trap the cats, treat them for fleas, neuter them, and put them back where we got them. We shipped no cats out of here. They had a job. And I still see descendants of a certain litter of black cats in this neighborhood. The dogs did less well. Many of the dogs drowned in the streets, many drowned in the homes, and their carcasses were strewn about, including dog carcasses on rooftops. But most of the dogs lived, and they packed up instinctively. So, I'm standing in the middle of this street, in the mud, with 2 guns, and a pack of dogs would come running by. The lead dog, a few weeks ago, he'd been laying on a sofa. He thought he was a sofa dog. Turns out he was a kid. He liked it. He was good at it. Even the last dog in any of those packs, the little bitty thing running at the back, trying to keep up, even that last dog had this joy, this sense of fulfilled purpose. It lasted till the fleas came. At that point, we began to trap the dogs, treat them for fleas, and ship them out of here. Now, many of these houses right here had holes chopped in the roofs. These people chopped their way out of the roof if they were here. Now, back there, their houses were blown away. But here, the water came in almost instantly, blew all the doors, and these people ran in the attic. Some had axes, some didn't. Now, elsewhere in the city, there was holes chopped into the roofs. Rescuers. But there was no time for that back here. These people chopped their way out, or they didn't. Now, this levee on the other side of this canal did not fail. So, for a month, this side was flooded, that side was not. Now, had been a rain flood over there for several hours, but this side stayed flooded. So, this ramp coming down off of this bridge here became the primary boat launch into the flooded city of New Orleans, right here. And I'm mentioning my niece, but her story happened to a lot of people. She was a nurse. Of course, she had to stay in the hospital for the storm. They all did. It was flooded. They lost power. Even their emergency power was lost. They were having meetings, making decisions about who would get the non-existent resources. The roof of several hospitals became the morgue. Eventually, she saw a boat floating by the hospital, and many people saw the similar things. Trailer boats left behind, floating with the trailer still attached to it. She swam to that boat, cut the trailer off, high-wired the boat, and drove it here. She knew to come here by the helicopter pattern in the sky. Those big buildings across there, all those parking lots became helipads. When she got here, and when many boats got here, they picked up people all the way, of course. There was people, strangers, standing at the top of that levee with gas cans waiting to come back into the city. On the other side of the levee was a line of cars a couple of miles long, private cars. Those people would take these survivors coming out of here anywhere. I mean, anywhere. Dallas, Houston, St. Louis, Atlanta, anywhere. The people coming out of here were not clean. Eventually, when this was pumped out and Teresa and I were assigned this neighborhood, the police felt compelled to take control of this intersection, being the first intersection into the flooded city at this location. There was no cross traffic except for me and Teresa. That was it. But they took control of this. There was 30 cars backed up both ways, a bunch of angry police in the middle of the street. Don't look at it. Just look at something else until they told you. You can kind of sense it was time to go. They got animated or something. Don't look at it. Eventually they didn't come. And there was 0 cars backed up in any direction. Of course. And I kind of wished for about 2 seconds that the traffic jam would come back so the police would feel better. I got over it. This one on the left over here, Lakeview Christian Center, this church, that's a new one. The old one destroyed by Katrina. These people started praying over that flooded church 6:30 a.m. on Tuesday. They still pray here 6:30 each Tuesday. Sometimes I can come to that. Now this wall in front of us is not a levee. This is a sound wall for the interstate. Teresa and I did have this neighborhood back here as well.
What's the relationship like now between the people involved?
Actually, it's pretty decent. It is pretty decent. Those guys, the Dancing and Bridge guys back here. This predates Katrina. This is a hole back here, we know that. These 4 pipes throw the water out of this neighborhood where the water's above our heads behind that wall. Now all of these, the water came in here quick enough to blow the windows and doors out, but these houses were not shifted generally. They've been completely stripped, but by and large, these have all been rebuilt back here. But this neighborhood back here, not so lucky. Perhaps you can see the road goes downhill here. Look at this hole back here. This neighborhood's not been repaired. And we're just starting to put houses back in here, but again, this is a hole. A big pump house predates Katrina, mainly for this hole right here. Now, if the people that were in here, in this neighborhood pre-Katrina, need help getting back into their own neighborhood, they'll get it. But nobody's asking for that. These people got more money for this property than they ever dreamt they could. They got new lives elsewhere. But if they need help to get back in here, they'll get it. Behind the pump house to our left is the Interstate 10. In this part of town, the Interstate 10 sits on that old American canal. It goes from that lighthouse, or went from that lighthouse you saw to the Superdome property. The canal was not making money. We covered it up and put the interstate in. We'll see more of that. So let's go up in Metry Cemetery, my favorite. So man, back road. 5 weeks of flood right here. Somebody's casket's poked their head out the ground. I'm going to show you. Henry Bow right here. Many captains of industry in here. Henry Bow built this interstate to our left. And much, much more. Andrew Higgins is back here. Of course, he designed and built the patrol torpedo boats, the PT boats. He designed and built the landing craft that drove up on the beaches of Europe. Most mayors, almost all mayors are in this cemetery. Several governors, every king of Carnival. Well, we're going back here to the old section. Across Natural Metry Bayou here on the right. Red cypress trees on either side of the bayou. Now out here to the right, you might notice the street is straight. It's curved over here on the left. This was a horse race track. This was an American horse racetrack, and also named for the bayou. This was Metairie Racecourse. And a Creole gentleman, Charles Howard, tried to join the jockey club here. He was denied. Creole was considered colored. The Americans told him no. So Charles bought the racetrack and made a cemetery of it. So Charles was not a smart aleck. He was a businessman. But if he had to thumb somebody, he could do it. I'll show you his tool. And up here on the right, watch for this lady. Many versions of this sculpture throughout Metairie Cemetery. Some with her arm high, some with wings, some with a star on the forehead. But the common thread, she holds a bunch of blossoms and drops individual blossoms. In some versions, she's a child. And yes, we bury in the earth. We always have. It doesn't work very well, but we do it. Like this spot right here. One casket beneath each of these tablets. No vault or anything like that. The problem is these caskets will come to the surface. It may take decades, it may take a century and more, but they're coming. And the reason for that is we're below sea level. Now, we're running pumps right now to throw the water out of here. If we turn the pumps off, the water will rise 3 feet above this grass to sea level. Now, we run the pumps and draw the water down till it's below the street so we can drive around. But we don't pump it any lower than we need to. And the caskets are in the water. They're floating towards the surface. We tried cast iron caskets. They float as good as anything. Then we started putting holes in them. That defeats the purpose. We gave up. We just put them back in. 5 weeks of flood here for Katrina, and somebody's poked their head out of the ground. We just put them back in. No big deal. But elsewhere they got away. Where the water was moving faster, they got away. They get away in every flood. Post-Katrina, we put an address on every casket in case we got to put it back. And this one on the right here, this is the tomb of Charles Howard, the Creole gentleman that bought this racetrack and made a cemetery of it. Now this guy, absolute gentleman, calm, Creole, therefore Catholic, and there are Christian motifs on his tomb. I love Charles's statues, the man inside with his finger to his lips, good advice from Charles Howard. And the lady up top with her chin in her hands, good advice from Charles Howard. And the fleur-de-lis, the spire over the door is the fleur-de-lis, literally translated flower of the lily, lily blossom, symbol of the Bourbon monarchy of France, symbol of New Orleans, symbol of the 2016 world champion New Orleans Saints. Oh, I made up part of that. Sorry. Charles Howard, we love that guy. He discriminated against no one. Discriminated against as he was. He discriminated against no one, including Confederates, I'll show you.
We were Yanks.
Now another of our below ground burial methods, each side of the street right here, coping graves, the little wall with the grass inside. Each of these coping graves is owned by a family, and unlimited burials will take place in each grave. Now the way we do that, the caskets are in there pretty much edge to edge. And when the family needs their grave again, these kind older gentlemen that work here will come over here, dig up the oldest casket in that family's grave, open the casket, transfer the remains back into the earth. The new casket sits on that. So unlimited burials within the family, all of the remains eventually mixed in the earth. And if they're digging when we come, they don't stop. Now we can dig a hole into the water table. It doesn't work good, but we can do it. When we start digging, the dirt's pretty dry, but 2 feet down, it starts getting wet. 6 feet down, it's absolute mud. We put it in a wagon and take it out of here till the funeral's over. We'll bring it back. But we've more or less taken the water out of the hole with the mud, with the earth in the form of mud. So we can dig a hole, but we can't leave it overnight. If we leave that hole overnight, it'll be full of water, and we can pump it out. But so we can dig a hole for a little while. These tombs will accept about 75 burials. Now the way we get all of that in there, there's 2 shelves inside each of these tombs. Those shelves are arranged like bunk beds. The shelves are short. They don't go all the way to the back wall. And there's a brick-lined pit in the earth beneath the tomb. Now the first time the family needs it, we put the casket in there. And then we don't want to open it for a year and a day. Initially there were infection control reasons for that wait. And the general unpleasantness at opening tombs too soon. But a year and a day is enough. The summer here, ridiculously hot. These tombs sit here and bake like cars in parking lots, but worse. 200 degrees any summer day in these, many summer days 300 degrees in these tombs. A year and a day is enough. It's safe to open. It's comfortable to open. We can put the second casket in there. The third burial gets more complicated. The oldest casket is pulled out, opened. The remains are transferred back onto that short shelf where they're pushed to the back. The remains fall off into the pit beneath the tomb. The new casket goes in. It's kind of a natural crematorium. We think 75 burials will take place in most of these. I don't know that we filled one up yet though. When the tablet on the front gets full of names, there's lots of ways to add more names. My favorite, they just start writing little when they get to the bottom. But more likely they'll take the tablet off, mount it on the side, start a new tablet in the front. Like on the left over here. Across this last Copen grave, back there that small white tomb already has 3 tablets of names on the wall. Over here, the trumpet playing angel, Louis Prima. Some of Louis' song lyrics there on his tablet. Oh, and y'all, last week, they made room for more names. Those 2 wings on Louis Prima's tomb, they just added those last week. On the left over there, that wing has the treble clef on it. Got Joanne's name on there. This one on the right over here has the bass clef on it. They're going to have to grow on me a little bit. I like them, I know it, but it's going to take me a while. Now you might have noted that was largely Italian back then. No rules. Anyone can be buried anywhere in here. Charles Howard said so. Anyone that can write the correct check can be buried anywhere in here. But enclaves did develop. That largely Italian back there. This largely Jewish right here in front of us. And on the left over here, these 2 cedar trees brought from Israel and planted on the Schwartz family Copen grave. That is, Jewish folks do prefer burial in the earth. But there are exceptions, like right here on the left, the Abraham family has a tomb kind of out of place right here. Again on the left here, the Moses Levy Copen grave with a Jewish version of the lady dropping the blood. Now the fence around this Metry cemetery is low, and we could be in here as kids at night at will. We could be in any of them, no matter how high the fence. But this fence low enough, we could bring our bikes in here and ride these streets all night. It's fascinating to be in here overnight. And on the left there, the old rugged cross. And around to the right of that cross, that broken granite column represents a young death, an interrupted life. And in front of us to the right here, these German Protestant tombs. Each has a remarkable sculpture on the top. German names. And above those German names, that circular German cross. And on either side of the tablet, in relief, inverted torches. Those inverted torches represent extinguished life. And one of these two sculpted ladies on the left over here holds an inverted torch.
Look at that. Wow, you see the stand.
And this tomb goes right here, this man.
Yeah.
Confederate soldiers, right here, the Charles Howard Cemetery. Charles discriminated against no one. And the Brunswicks over here on the left. This pyramid tomb built with a pharmaceutical fortune.
Wow. Oh. Get it.
And the Fallon family tomb, right here on the left. There's that lady chin in hand once again. I love that lady. Now my people, for the most part, sailboat racers. And we are generally committed to Lake Pontchartrain as ash. I made that up. They put it up for Halloween. Isn't that awesome though? I took my 10-year-old granddaughter here last